Okay. Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our May 24th, 2017 City Council meeting. I will call this meeting to order. We will start with a moment of reflection offered by Randy Ortlib.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. It's great to be back to the place of fond memories, at least for me personally. It was not that long ago that I was here, and we received a nearly unanimous approval of the ballpark proposal, which later died because the state took away our redevelopment agency, but I still have fond memories. It's great to be back. I'm privileged today to be able to provide a moment of reflection before today's meeting. Our city enjoys many blessings. It was founded by energetic and hopeful people many generations ago. It has been stewarded by responsible and prudent managers since its founding. Escondido also enjoys great natural beauty and a wonderful, healthy climate. In the Pledge of Allegiance following this message, we acknowledge that our nation, including the city of Escondido, is under God, that is, under the authority and protection of the Creator. Please join me in prayer. Heavenly Father, I thank you for all the blessings you have bestowed upon the city, upon this state, and upon this nation. You have blessed this city beyond measure, and for all these blessings, I praise you. I pray that your Spirit will guide all participants in today's meeting, the City Council, the staff, and all the citizens who care for this city and who participate in its government. I ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you. I would like to ask Council Member Ed Gallo, he's a veteran, to lead us in the pledge.
Let's not forget Memorial Day, Monday. That's right. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call indicates that all council members are present. We have a good presentation. I would like to invite Chief Greg Carter and Captain Eric Skaya to the podium to present the Police Department Citizen Citation Award. So,
got quite a group that's going to come down with me, Mayor.
okay.
Mayor, Council, the community of Escondido, I'm here to give you a great story, or at least a good ending, and some acts of heroism that probably can't be duplicated easy, I can tell you that. On August 3rd, 2016, an adult female was riding in the front passenger seat of a vehicle being driven by her boyfriend. The boyfriend became agitated and struck the victim in the head with a tire iron. The suspect stopped the vehicle and continued to assault the victim. Fernando Martinez was in the area and heard the screaming from the stopped vehicle. Fernando saw the suspect assaulting the victim in the head and flagged down several other passerbys to assist. Several other witnesses stopped to help the victim, who was screaming that her boyfriend was trying to kill her. Bala Carter, right there, stopped to assist and threw a skateboard at the suspect, trying to distract him and redirect his attention away from the victim. Laura and Robert Lambert also stopped and called 911 to relay important information to the dispatchers. Despite the growing number of concerned citizens, the suspect continued to physically assault the victim. William Stam, there, sorry, there's two Williams, so I apologize, tried to physically intervene by grabbing the suspect by the arm in spite of the serious danger the suspect posed. The suspect threatened William with a tire iron each time William attempted to pull him away from the victim. Bill Stout on the end, saw an opportunity and tackled the suspect, taking him to the ground, where several others controlled him until police arrived and took the suspect into custody. Several of the citizens helped put this case to rest by testifying in court, despite the victim's unwillingness to testify. The suspect was found guilty of assault with a deadly weapon, assault with great bodily injury, a violation of restraining order, and thanks to the individuals you have up here, as well as Ben Barlow with the deputy DA on the end, the suspect was found guilty and is going to serve 38 years to life in prison.
Woohoo!
If you're involved in this incident and your willingness to place yourself in harm's way to help a stranger, epitomizes the spirit of our community. And I can't thank you enough. I know that the circle of violence with domestic violence is such that it's not surprising to me that the victim wouldn't be coming forward to testify against the boyfriend. But had this group not intervened, and we got there when we did, it could have turned out to be a homicide case. So we owe them a great deal of gratitude. And Deputy Dave Barlow putting this together with 6 individuals helping as witnesses, intervening, a victim that's not cooperative, and a suspect that's a bad person. Everybody up here deserves another round of applause for such a fantastic. Mayor, will you come down with me and help me hand out the awards? Well, and Mayor, he's the one that tackled him, so it makes sense to me. Yeah.
Thank you. Look, you know, this is a good example of what our community is about. Working with citizens putting, risking their life on the line to save innocent people. We're going to be tough on crime. We're going to make sure that troublemakers will not live in our community. And we're going to make sure we have the finest police department in this nation. We're going to make sure our community is safe every day. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Did you want to say anything, sir? Marlon? I'm sorry.
I just want to add, the gentleman up here did an incredibly courageous thing that it's also not overlooked. I agree with the mayor that the police department and the police resources, Escondido Police Department, made my job incredibly easy to prosecute this individual. So I think it's a combination. And I told all 3 of these witnesses, these great men up here, without a doubt, they saved a life that day. They absolutely saved a life. And the heroic actions by them and the absolute, what we expect, the exceptional work that the Escondido Police Department does, allowed us to put this individual away for life. And he will no longer be a threat to the streets of Escondido, which is excellent. So thank you again to everyone up here.
Get in the picture.
Yeah, come on. You put the glue.
Good job, guys. Wow.
Great. We go to oral communications. Do we have any requests? We don't have any requests to speak. So we move on to our calendar. First, consent calendar. Any items to be pulled, council? A motion to approve. I have a motion by Councilmember Diaz. I have a second by Councilmember Mike Morasco. Please vote.
5 yes votes.
Excellent. We go to our public hearings. First one is item 8, short form rent increase application for WESTWINDS Mobile Home Park. Staff report, please.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the Rent Review Board. I am Belinda Rojas, Program Administrator in the Housing and Neighborhood Services Division. With me today is Code Enforcement Officer Andrew Modulin. For your consideration this afternoon is a short form application for the WESTWINDS Mobile Home Park. This is a all-ages park located at 1415 South Pine Street. 12 spaces are subject to rent control. The remaining spaces are vacant, on long-term leases, are occupied by RVs, or have units which are owned by the park. 0 residents are signed in to protest the short-form application. Park amenities are accessible to all residents and include a seasonal pool, clubhouse with a galley, kitchen, and coin laundry facilities. This rent increase request covers a 12-month period of consideration. This is the 20th rent increase application for the park. Increases have been considered annually for the past decade. The last increase was approved in May 2016 for an average increase of $8.27 per month. 75% of the change in CPI for the current period is 1.467. The average space rent for the 12 spaces subject to rent control is $462.66. The average requested increase is $6.79. Increases range from $4.59 to $9.54. There was a resident meeting on April 12. No residents attended, and the meeting was canceled. A code inspection of common areas took place on April 8 and April 19, 2017, with the lighting inspection conducted on April 18. 5 general and 1 lighting violations were found. The park was re-inspected on May 18. All violations have been signed off. Staff asks the board to consider the short-form rent increase application for WESTWINDS and, if approved, to adopt Rent Review Board Resolution number 2017-01, granting an increase of 75% of the change in CPI, or 1.467, which equals an average increase of $6.79. This concludes the presentation of the staff report. I would be pleased to answer any questions you may have. There is no resident representative. Jim Yonce is present as the owner's representative.
Okay, let me invite Jim Yonce to see if the council has any questions or any remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. On behalf of Thompson Properties, Bart Thompson, we'd like to thank you for considering our application for the rent increase at WESTWINDS. I was just thinking as I was sitting there, it's about 17 years now I've been involved in this, and looking at the pictures, what a change it is from when I first walked on the property in the year 2000. So if I can answer any questions that you may have about the park, I'd be happy to do so.
Any question, council members? Yes. I don't have the mouse, so the mouse disappeared. Okay, go ahead.
So I just have a simple question. It says you rent some of the spaces as RV spaces.
There's one currently that's occupied by an RV, yes.
But the RV is not occupied. It's just parked there. Nobody lives in it.
No, there's a person living there.
So you can live in an RV?
In WESTWINDS, you can, yes. Interesting.
I don't know that I've ever heard that or noticed it. So can somebody explain where and when?
We used to have, probably about 12 of them at one time, and we've gotten down to 1.
The mouse was
Eventually it'll be none, but right now there's still 1 there.
Okay, so it's not your choice, your first choice to have this situation?
Yeah, for those, and I know you've been with us for a while through the growth of the park. The property was originally developed as both a mobile home park and an RV park. So the spaces were all set up on the exterior on an angle that made it real easy to pull in an RV, but made it very difficult to put a nice mobile home on that space. So over the years, we've had RVs on vacant lots that occupy that until such time as we could acquire an adequate space to change the lots, straighten them out, and put in a rectangular home, which I'm sure you've seen has been quite an upgrade there. So we're down to 1 space that still is in an odd configuration, and we don't, we have never asked somebody to leave so we could fix the park up. It's just a matter of when such time as a home next to it might become available, then we'll straighten out that segment, and that'll be a mobile home site.
So this RV is not on rent control?
It is not.
And are there any others in the city? I don't know that I've ever heard of this. You don't have any others at your parks?
No, neither. And for some reason, I think that it was purposely excluded at Greencrest. I believe that's in the language of their operating permit. So we have none there. We have none at Carefree Ranch because there's no need for such a thing there.
I know some parks have RV parking, and I don't know if I wrongfully assumed that the RVs were simply just parked like a car. I never thought about somebody living in them in the mobile home park. So
they are living in their RV on that space.
In just that one, okay. The other parks are not your issue. I get that. So, okay, thank you. Apparently, nobody has any issues with your park. And
Did you, Councilmember Gallo? Did you make the motion, Councilmember Diaz? I have it here. Okay.
well, I can't.
All right.
I don't mind doing it.
Okay. Councilmember Gallo?
We'll do that. I think there's a lot to be said that the meeting is called and no one shows up. And like you said, back in 2000, almost all the hearings were pretty contentious. But that's changed over the past 17 years. The only thing that gets me is, some of these things, like the loose handrail at the pool. I have probably seen that 100 times. Doesn't anybody just kind of walk by and see if it rattles and say, maybe I better tighten the bolt? You know what I'm saying?
I will tell you that I was sharing with these folks out front that I used to accuse Art of, because he was he was big like me, he'd really torque on the thing. And I said, when the county comes and does it, they don't do that. But when this came up again, I talked to folks in our maintenance department, because my boss doesn't like that being on the report either when it shows up more than once. So they went in, they replaced the whole rail this time.
Yeah.
The whole mounting to it, yeah. So I'm really hoping, at least at WESTWINDS next year, I could say it's not on the list.
Well, I was going to make mention, before the inspection next year, check out the rail, take care of it, fix the light bulb, because I know that's going to come up. There's going to be a light bulb out someplace, anyway.
Okay. Councilmember Masson?
No questions or no stories. I just wanted to say good job, Belinda, for the presentation. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Very good. I have a motion by Councilmember Diaz. I have a second by Councilmember Gallo. Please vote to accept staff recommendation.
5 yes votes.
All right. Thank you. Great. Thank you. Go to item 9, zoning code amendment and rezone AZ 16 to PHJ 17. Whatever that thing. Track number.
Okay. Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, members of the council. My name is Bill Martin. I'm the Director of Community Development. And this item is a citywide amendment of the Escondido zoning code to reorganize and consolidate the residential zones into one single article, establish an R530 zone and associated development standards, identify minor CUPs, and update some of the definitions in the zoning code. And this is all in conjunction with a proposal for a rezone of 186 parcels of land in the R424 zone up to the new R530 zone that's being proposed this evening. A little bit of background. Back in October of 2016 and March of this year, the City Council approved 2 previous zoning code amendments related to our YES program. That included simplifying some conditional use permit reviews, eliminating outdated processes, streamlining the plan development process, and expanding the role of the zoning administrator. So this request is part of continued efforts to streamline the zoning code and development review processes and implement the general plan. The request consists of 3 components. The first is to consolidate 8 zoning code articles regulating residential zoning and development standards into one article. That would be Article 6, and some associated code changes. The second component involves implementation of general plan land use policy and the Urban 5 designation by establishing a new residential zone of the R530 that we're calling very high multiple residential. Would allow up to 30 dwelling units per acre. And then the third component is a rezone of those 186 parcels from the current R424 zone to the new R530 zone. So the first component would consolidate the residential standards into the one article, provides one reference and comparison of all types of residential development. Also incorporates the use of tables and eliminates redundant code sections to streamline the code. Revises some existing standards, resulting in more internally consistent and updated code. And provides new R5 standards that are consistent with the general plan Urban 5 designation and appropriate for that neighborhood between Center City Parkway and Escondido Boulevard that's south of 5th Avenue. The second component is the proposed new R5 zoning standards, and so here's a side-by-side comparison with the R4 zone and on the left and the proposed R5 zone. There's even a couple changes here that are underlined in the R4 zone itself. You can see we're proposing to reduce the minimum lot size from 7,000 square feet to 6,000, which is consistent actually with the R3 zone. Not sure why we had the R4 zone higher. And then in the minimum lot frontage, we're dropping that from 50 feet to 35 feet, which again is consistent with the R3. Looking over on the right-hand column, you can see that the R5 standards are fairly similar, almost exact to the R4. The main difference being the density, which would be increased from 24 units to 30 units per acre. And again, similar in most categories with respect to building height, number of stories, maximum or minimum floor area. The only differences being the floor area ratio, which is increased slightly in the proposed R5 zone, and then the square footage allowed for residential and parking regardless of the FAR. One additional thing I wanted to point out on this slide is you can see in the R4 zone the private storage area of 80 cubic feet. That's being introduced into the zone. It's currently not a requirement unless you're developing condominiums. And so essentially this is one way of applying our condominium standard across to all multifamily, including apartments as well. And then the third component is the proposed rezone. And so on the left you have the general plan map, on the right you have the zoning map. So on the left map you can see the Urban 5 designation that covers the parcels in green. Those are the 186 parcels that I mentioned that are changing. And then over on the right hand side you can see their current zoning of R424. That would now change to R5-30. Allowing that higher density development.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
2 questions. Prop S, when we intensify density, doesn't that trigger Prop S?
No, actually this Urban 5 was developed as part of the general plan update in 2012.
It's already in there. Okay.
Yes.
So we're, okay. And then the green properties that you're proposing to rezone, those are not vacant. They're already developed. So is this intended to cause redevelopment?
It could, if the property owners were interested in redeveloping. They could redevelop or perhaps even add a unit.
Well, not just one unit. I mean, you're asking, you could add a lot of units, right? 30 units is a lot.
Potentially. But these are small properties, about 6,000 square feet, and we generally figure most could add potentially up to about 1 unit. Now, if you wanted to aggregate or consolidate several parcels, then sure, you could do a larger scale redevelopment project.
Okay.
So just to summarize on the rezone, it's consistent with the existing general plan designation of Urban 5, which allows that density up to 30 units per acre. The area is flat. It's a developed urban area, currently zoned for high density. The area lies within major transportation and commercial corridors that provide convenient access to a wide variety of facilities and services. Planning Commission reviewed the proposal last month, unanimously recommended approval of all aspects, including the proposed code amendments, the R530 zoning category, and the proposed rezone, as well as the environmental determination. Some of the public comments we received prior to the Planning Commission hearing, we did receive 7 phone calls, all concerned regarding the rezone. 6 of the callers were able to confirm that their properties were not within that rezone area, and thus they had no further concerns. The remaining caller confirmed that her property was within that area, but once she was informed that there was no eminent domain involved, then she had no further concerns. We had one resident speak during the Planning Commission hearing. He expressed his concern that the rezone could exacerbate some of the parking issues that he felt existed in the neighborhood, but generally wasn't opposed to allowing the higher density. And it was noted actually by Chairman Weber that the Urban 5 designation was something that had been confirmed by the voters of Escondido during the general plan process, and so that this rezone was just following that aspect of our general plan. So with that, the Planning Commission and staff recommendation is united on this issue. Recommend adoption of the environmental determination and approval of the proposed amendments to 3 of our zoning code articles, as well as the repeal of 7 of our zoning code articles as part of our streamlining, and then also recommend approval of the proposed rezone. And that concludes staff's presentation.
Member Gallo, you have a question.
Just a quick one. Olga brought up the Prop S thing.
One second, before we start that, this is a public hearing. I don't have any requests to speak, so I'll open and close the public hearing. Councilmember Gallo.
Okay. Is there some reason, because back in 2001, I told our city manager at the time that I would like to see us try to go from like 2nd or 3rd Avenue all the way to 17th and rezone that area to higher density, and also allow vacating the alleyways to increase the yield on the properties. So is there some reason that you started south of the alley on between 5th and 6th?
Yeah, the reason is because the downtown specific plan covers that area to the north. And so it's the R424 zone that doesn't start until you hit that southern area.
So we can't change that for the downtown specific plan, or?
We could potentially, but that area, that I'm not sure which district that is, but I'm sure it already allows more than 30 units per acre.
Okay. But, you know, and this brought me back to, John, you probably remember this. Prior to 1990, it happened to be June 6th of 1990, somehow or another, it's emblazoned in my brain, when the city downzoned all the multiple zone properties. I think R4 was R440.
I don't remember that it was that high. I think it was a 30 at that time.
It's much younger than you.
I don't know if it was 30. I think it was higher than that. Because I am. I'm going 1990. The council made a decision to downzone all the multiple zone properties, and they did. I think they basically did away with the R4 zone, or they cut it down to where. Because I had clients who lost a lot of money on paper.
The density was definitely reduced.
Yeah.
I don't know that it was as high as 40 though at the time.
But anyway, the other
Property's been developed for a very long time, so it was developed before 90s, so nothing really happened.
But I think this is the right move, because you're right between Escondido Boulevard and Center City Parkway. I think it's a smart thing to do. If you're going to have parking, you know, I don't care what we do, parking's going to be a problem no matter what you do. Okay? If you allow 10 spaces per unit, you're probably going to have 12 cars. I mean, that's just the way it goes.
Great. I think my question is, Bill, we have designated the Urban 5 in the general plan that has been approved by the voters in 2012. Why did we wait till now to do these changes? What triggered that?
What triggered it was the consolidation of the residential zones, and so it was a point where we could kind of do it all at one point. And then also we had some staff available, which we hadn't prior to that, so it was a good opportunity for us.
I think it's an excellent opportunity to redevelop these old homes. If you drive by Central City Parkway, you can see these really aged homes, and I believe this is an opportunity for some redevelopment if they choose to. It is the appropriate density. And as far as the back alleys are concerned, I think we're doing it on a project-by-project basis. On Orange and 2nd Avenue, we eliminated those. I don't think there is any problem. First, we don't need them, we don't have to maintain them, and it will make the project a better project. So, okay, Councilmember Diaz, you have more comments?
Since this property shares a boundary with Center City Parkway, this area, I often see people walking on Center City where there isn't a sidewalk, but there seems to be width. And I don't know when the decision was made not to have walking on Center City, but it seems like a stretch of it should possibly have a sidewalk or something more than just a bike path on the edge of the road.
This is Caltrans, I think.
It was Caltrans, not anymore.
We have a sidewalk on the other side from Felicita to right in front of that mobile home park. There, it just kind of meanders, but it's very well used and it looks nice, but that's the only stretch that has a sidewalk. Everywhere else, we just made it.
I don't know if you want to have a sidewalk because the speed limit is 65 miles an hour.
It's a very wide road though, and the sidewalk is not right on the edge of the road. It's usually pushed in a little bit. There's a buffer.
That's a different issue. Maybe Julie, you want to add to comment?
Our focus has been to provide safe crossing points across Center City with the signalized locations and improving the crosswalks and the ped ramps at each of those crossing. I think you'll notice at 5th and 9th, there's several locations where we've kind of added crossing points so that the pedestrians can safely get across, so that they can traverse in the northerly and southerly direction along the streets like Escondido that have continuous sidewalks, and it's a little better path for them to travel. That's been our main focus at this point.
I guess when you're walking, though, you'll go the shortest distance possible. So I see people walking along there in what looks like kind of just the side of the road or in the culvert on the right side of this drawing. It just makes me sad because it doesn't look like a very pedestrian-friendly environment.
Okay. Are you done, Councilor Diaz?
It was a question. Since we're talking about this area, have we considered future plans for that?
Okay, Councilmember Morasco.
Well, one of the things that I see, because I drive it all the time, is there really are no access points except for the streets.
They come from
and so someone can either go a quarter of a block either side and walk on sidewalks, or if they choose, they can walk on Center City Parkway, where it's definitely not safe the way it's currently configured. I personally don't see it as an issue. I like it the way it looks. I would prefer not to have it become a pedestrian thoroughfare because I think it's much safer and preferred to keep it the way it currently is designed, rather than trying to put sidewalks in there, especially on the east side.
And also, we have a lot of neighborhoods. They don't have sidewalks. These should take priority.
Yeah, well, especially if there were access points, that'd be different. But there really are no access points.
So that's the thing. The fencing, every road that ends like 11th, 10th, even though there's not a street or a sign or a light, the fencing is either removed or there is no fencing. It is pedestrian, accessible. So.
Yeah, I don't see it personally.
Yeah.
Okay, I see
anyway,
it.
That's a different topic to discuss. Now we're doing the density, but that's a good point. Central City Parkway is a very busy street, so I think, Bill, your answer is correct. We have to make sure the crossings are safe first. All right, we have a motion by Deputy Mayor Masson, have a second by Councilmember Morasco. Please vote to accept staff recommendation.
5 yes votes.
Excellent. We go to item 10, zoning code amendment, AZ 16-0009. Okay. The mic, and closer to the microphone, please. The mic is on. There we go.
The last item, public hearing item on tonight's agenda, is an amendment to Article 34 of the Communication Antennas Ordinance to actually modify the regulations for facilities within the public right-of-way. So it's very specific for a specific section of the ordinance. A bit of background. Over the years, there's been an unprecedented growth in the demand for wireless service. The capacity demand on broadband is expanding exponentially, where you have the Internet of Things and everybody needs to be connected. So over the last 20 years, the wireless industry has built out their macro or very larger wireless network, and over the last 5 and 10 years have been upgrading those as technology has been increasing and services have been increasing and capacity increases. However, with the new demand in neighborhoods, in traffic centers, in downtown areas to provide that capacity, the macro facilities aren't the best way to do that. And the best way is the new small cell technology, including the ability to accommodate the new 5G that will be coming out. So what that consists of, instead of these larger that you're used to, these towers with up to 12 antennas on them, very high powered, they need to target a very specific area. So they're looking at the public right-of-way, which has the infrastructure to do that, to tackle these nodes where you have very high capacity issues for an apartment complex or a residential neighborhood or a commercial node, and where the macro facilities don't have the technology to adequately cover that. The new facilities are much better facilitated to do that. They cover a smaller area and can target a very specific user or location. Again, the macro facility includes more of the larger facilities, and they cover a longer range, are more higher powered, and the term macro cell is used to describe the widest range of cell sites. A microcell basically is encompassed of many different technologies. You may have some in your house. We have some here at City Hall that cover just uses inside the city. We have smaller ones outside that cover Grand Avenue and so forth. So small cells are fundamentally about adding capacity to target areas where you have high traffic areas. Small cells occupy less space. They have less power uses, so they can't cover a larger area. Generally a couple hundred meters to a couple hundred feet. The location or the picture on the left is your traditional macro cell, 30, 40, 50 feet in height. It can accommodate many panel antennas, and infrastructure has larger radio units on the ground and can cover more than one carrier. The photo on the right is a traditional small cell facility. This is a converted street light. You can see the cylindrical antenna on the top and the radio relay units on the bottom. This would have been installed in many neighborhoods. I've been traveling around and noticing them now in different cities I go to. They've been installed mainly in their commercial nodes to target those high capacity use areas. These are some typical facilities you might see around Escondido. This is actually a macro facility. It's one of the only ones we have that's in the right-of-way. It was a modified street light, but you can see the larger antennas on it. So it would be considered a small macro facility. It was covering a coverage and capacity area. This is, pardon me? It's off of Avocado.
In the industrial area?
Up in some industrial and there's some residential and some mobile home parks right there. Up in that area. You can see here the equipment was vaulted underground. It was the only one that we did many years ago. Most recently, this is a small cell that was installed on North Escondido Boulevard. You can see the antenna on the top and the computers and equipment in this cabinet here on an existing street light, and some of the other components have been vaulted underground. This is not in Escondido, but this would be an older and traditional cell site on a wooden pole where you see the antenna at the top. Generally, the wooden poles have a meter and a cutoff switch, and this is all fans and computer equipment in here. The wooden poles generally are more obtrusive and not as streamlined as the the light poles for a number of reasons.
What city is that?
I got this one off the internet. This could be San Francisco.
Okay.
So the current request is to establish a new wireless facility permit. We're getting a lot of pressure from the wireless industry to process these new small cells in the right-of-way, and they don't come in one at a time like the macros did. There's one cell site, one application. They're coming in at a dozen, 15 at a time throughout the city. So we were looking at how the current ordinance applied to them and how we would efficiently process these and get them out and implemented as quick as possible, but still address the impacts they would have on residential and commercial neighborhoods. We want the least intrusive design, but still the most efficient process so we can process these in batches and get them out and deployed in the community. So what we've looked at is establishing a new wireless facility permit so we can keep track of them instead of processing in the old way of a plot plan and a conditional use permit. We've encouraged the new wireless facilities to locate on existing streetlights. They're the less intrusive designs. We have a lot of streetlights out there, and they have infrastructure currently there to support them. However, there are other structures within the right-of-way that they can go to also. They can put up new streetlights. They can go on existing utility poles, bus stops. And we have come up with a preferred list and a discouraged list. As you work down the list, we want you to go to streetlights first and then work your way down the list. We also have some discouraged locations and sites. For instance, we have a new administrative review process. So most of these would be processed through the administrative review process if they fit into this nice little box. Certain designs, certain locations, efficient process, we'll batch them together and move them through the process. But there's certain locations where you may get some pushback from the community, especially on non-circulation element streets in single-family residential neighborhoods, or placing one right in front of somebody's front yard, in front of their front door. We recommend that in those locations that a conditional use permit and a public hearing process is appropriate for those, so the public is notified, and the most appropriate design is located on that site if it was approved. We're also coming up with we're going to follow up with more detailed design guidelines to help implement this ordinance and with new application processes. And we'll be following on in the next couple of months with that. At that time, if there's any needed tweaks in the ordinance that we found as implementing these facilities that are waiting, we can do that at that time too. These are some of the preferred designs. This is actually one on the left. It's on a street light that's proposed for Escondido now. And we've approved 8 of them, and there's 4 more to go. This would be on city street lights. And these are just other designs in San Francisco that are preferred and are very unobtrusive, whether they're the antenna that's on top of the street light or the antennas that are mounted onto the pole here. What I'd like to show you is designs that would be least preferred or discouraged in the city. You have these facilities that are offset on these poles here and are very obtrusive, or where you have facilities where they don't integrate well into a street light. Here's one in someone's front yard. This is an older design. I probably wouldn't see that here in Escondido, with very large equipment cabinets, and we want to try to avoid that where possible. But there may be locations where that is okay in some of the more rural areas. You see them on Del Dios Highway, and I don't think you notice them until you know they're there, because they're very in more rural areas where you have a higher level of traffic. And down at the bottom, we also want to eliminate over-proliferation of utility cabinets, or utility cabinets. This is one in Escondido that's probably in the wrong location here, right at the edge of a driveway in front of a home in this location.
Mm-hmm. With the shopping cart.
Yeah, with a shopping cart.
So while you have these pictures up, I would want to prohibit these, not discourage them, but they're absolutely hideous, and I don't want them anywhere in the city.
Yes, these wouldn't fall into our design guidelines. If anything was proposed that didn't fit into the design guidelines, you could still propose it, but it would elevate that up to the conditional use permit process.
Good stuff. It's old technology, right? This is old technology, isn't it? I mean,
These are some of the older designs, but I wanted to show you the kind of the breadth of what has been done out there. This item was heard by the Planning Commission on April 25th, and they unanimously recommended approval, 7-0. They did not raise any specific questions or issues regarding the ordinance, and no one from the public spoke at the hearing. Subsequent to the hearing, we received several letters from industry providers that we have been working with currently on their implementation of their networks, working on their design so they will fit in with our ordinance. And we also met with representatives last week to address those issues that they had incorporated in the letters in the staff report. And what they're looking for is, in our ordinances, is a bit more flexibility in the process, perhaps making more of their designs administratively approved if they fit into these tight design guidelines, and interpretation of some of the guidelines, and perhaps modification of some of the very tight design guidelines we have. We took some of those from a lot of the cities that had implemented new wireless ordinances, so those are actually on the books in other cities, and we took those at looking at what would be appropriate for the city and what would fit in well with the designs we're seeing coming in. However, the industry has looked at some of those very tight designs and may request some modifications to fit in with what they see coming down the line, especially with 5G, but also to ensure that the ordinance still allows for an appropriate design for the area, and at least in intrusive design, and they would work with the city. We also received a letter today from Verizon requesting that we postpone this hearing in order to address some of the issues that we've already been addressing. However, staff has been working with some of the carriers that are here in the audience right now who want the ordinance to be adopted so they can submit their applications for these networks and get them rolling and out in the field as soon as possible. Again, I wanted to mention that we will be coming back in the next few months with the more detailed design guidelines, and as we're working with the rollout, if we need to fine-tune any of the ordinance provisions, we can come back and do that at that time also. With that, staff is recommending approval of the zoning code amendment to Article 34 to modify the regulations for wireless communication facilities in the right-of-way as indicated in Exhibit B of the ordinance. That concludes the presentation.
Thank you. I have requests from the industry, so do you want to hear them first? Okay. I'll open the public hearing. I have two speakers, Paul O'Boyle first.
Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, my name is Paul O'Boyle. I'm outside counsel for Crown Castle. I'd like to just kind of speak generally about telecommunications and where it's going. I submitted a letter specifically about design criteria that you're proposing that I think should be modified. I can go into those specifically if you'd like, but I'd like to talk more generally about what the challenge is for the community and what you as the City Council have to decide what you want to do. Over half the homes in America don't have a landline. 70% of all 911 calls are used on a cell phone. Wireless telecommunications is no longer a luxury, it's a critical infrastructure. With 5G coming, we're being told that you need to be about 1.5 million sites nationwide. Crown Castle controls about 90% of the market in the right-of-way. We have roughly 20,000. So this is all going to take place in the next 10, 15 years. The question becomes, excuse me, how do we get from here to there? And what I've found is that jurisdictions that are about 100,000 plus, you don't have the time or the resources to do a CUP on each and every site. It's just too much work. So the recommendation, and you're doing it, is have a tiered process. Have an administrative process for cell sites that are small, fit into a certain criteria in certain locations. That's a good start. The problem is, how do you get to that last mile, the residential areas? Right now, your ordinance only allows to go on streetlights. That's not the way to go. We don't need fewer facilities. We need more of them. We need more options, more abilities. J. Paul, if you could pull up some of those photos of some options. In other jurisdictions where we don't have a lot of vertical infrastructure, well, this one right here you're looking at, this is attached to a traffic signal in a business core area. Pretty innocuous, side-mounted radome. The equipment looks like it's mounted to the pole behind the traffic sign. I don't know if you can see it behind the traffic signal itself. Some of the radios are actually mounted to the pole as well. You can't really see it so well. Next picture, if you would. These are right here are traffic signs. Sometimes there are rural areas in Escondido, especially in the eastern part, where there aren't a lot of infrastructure. You want to integrate it into the community as much as possible, tailor it. These are some facilities that we've used. As you can see, those are probably about 18 feet tall. Blends it pretty well with the community. The equipment is undergrounded in the vaults, as you can see there. The only thing that's exposed is the radios, the antennas, and then behind the traffic sign itself, you can see the radios being hung up again. Pretty innocuous if you think about it. Next one, please. These are some more. The one on the right is a street light. Just one of the things I want to say specifically about your ordinance. It says that the antenna cannot be larger than the diameter of the pole. These poles taper very narrowly, not very much. And
1 second.
You just went off mic.
Oh,
Okay.
sorry.
Go ahead.
There you are. It's not you.
My time ran out. But anyway, it's hard to keep the bracket on top of the pole. It's almost impossible. So some of your criteria is very narrowly confining. The one on the left there you can see is also on a traffic sign. The antenna's on top. You can see it's vaulted. But as you can see, sometimes vaulting requires stacks above ground. So that has tripping hazards, pedestrian issues, ADA issues. So sometimes we like to put the equipment on the pole so you don't have that, depending on the access on the right-of-way. I can go into more specifics, but I think that you're just scratching the surface here. You need more opportunities to tailor it to the neighborhoods. And right now, you're just too limited.
You are the one who wrote us a letter
Yes.
in behalf of Verizon.
Crown Castle.
Crown Castle. Okay.
I already, the one you got for Verizon today, I sent mine in last week.
So what you're asking is for more flexibility in installing this, and our staff is concerned about the aesthetic. And so not to just have it.
It all boils down to aesthetics.
Right. So, but I think the CUP is an administrative CUP. It's not a regular CUP. Is that?
That's right. I had that question.
Mm.
It's a CUP.
Yeah, no, it would be a planning commission CUP in this case, because otherwise it would be the same person making the decision.
Okay. We will go back to this discussion. Thank you very much. I have a second speaker, Michael Fulton from T-Mobile.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council members. I'm here today. My name is Michael Fulton. I'm with T-Mobile, and I'm here to talk about the wireless ordinance. And we, from the carrier's point of view, we really appreciate the city stepping up and defining a process for us to get the small cells deployed into the network. So what we find on the macro layer, we probably have 36 to 48 towers here in Escondido, and what we're finding is that in the apartment complexes in the city centers, we're getting hotspots with data usage as more people gravitate away from their traditional landlines onto their phones. And in some cases, we've seen studies where a lot of the lower income families, their phone is their only source to the internet. So when they're at home in the evenings, there's points of the day where their phones become unusable. So we have data that comes out of our tools where we're able to look to see where these hotspots are generated. So a macro site will generally cover, say, a 10 square mile radius. And what happens is when a hotspot generates in that area, it affects all the users in that 10 square miles. So what we want to do in cooperation with the city is deploy some small cells. So the small cells allow us to put technology right in the middle of that hotspot, that center, and then we aim our antennas at the hotspot, very low power, that pulls that traffic into the small cell, which allows the macro cell to operate as it's been designed. And as we looked over the ordinance from the T-Mobile's perspective, there's two areas in there that may cause problems for us in the future as we roll out our design. And one of them called out having no wireless facilities located within 300 feet of each other on a city pole. And the problem is, in a lot of instances, when we try and narrow in our antennas to cover this hotspot, there aren't a whole lot of light poles or traffic lights to mount on. And in addition to T-Mobile, now we have Verizon, AT&T, and Sprint also trying to locate in there. And Well, I think what we're going to find is the first person or the first carrier to get in is going to have a competitive advantage to the other carriers because we won't be able to get within 300 feet of that pole. So I asked that maybe that be reviewed and slightly changed to accommodate all the carriers. And then lastly, T-Mobile, this year we've spent $15 million on spectrum, 600 megahertz low band spectrum. And what that's going to allow us to do is penetrate further into the homes, provide better coverage, and there's a lot of bandwidth that will help us increase the data speeds to the handsets. And the low band spectrum operates different than the typical panels you see now. We all operate in the 1900, 2100 megahertz range. And the lower band spectrum is going to require a little bit of a larger antenna. Typically, we'd like to see an 8-foot antenna to properly work with that frequency, but the ordinance is calling out a 2-foot antenna. We would ask that it be expanded to at least 3 feet to accommodate our low band spectrum in the future.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. So if there's any questions.
Yeah, question, yes, Councilmember.
That last little piece I don't understand. 2 foot, are you talking about the size of the thing that you mount on the pole?
Right. Well,
that you want an 8-foot thing on a pole? Well, they like 8 foot. We're saying 2. He'll settle for 3. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, the low band spectrum, it operates more effectively because of the wavelength of the frequency. An 8-foot antenna is optimally designed to capture that wavelength. But they've got tools and tricks that they can shorten it down, and really a 3-foot antenna is about the smallest we can use to capture that and capture those frequencies.
Okay.
I don't think I can picture an 8-foot gadget,
No.
so I don't know if any of your pictures had something like that.
No, we would never, okay. I'm just saying, that's what we'd like to do, but we would never propose an 8-foot antenna.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate it. I have a question to Mr. McGinnis. Now, one of the letters referred to the state regulations and the existing laws and the conflict of this ordinance with the state laws. So, is there any from a law, the law, existing laws, are we in violation of any of the state laws?
I would say no. We've looked at that, and we've looked at this T-Mobile West case that they've been using, suggesting that we are limited or prohibited from doing what we're trying to accomplish here. And I don't read that case that way. I think what we're trying to do here is strike a balance between what's required and those things that we have control over as part of our regular constitutional police power. And so things like aesthetics, safety, those are the kinds of things that we still have power on. And I would suggest then that we're doing the right thing. But I'll also suggest that the implementing guidelines will be helpful in trying to dial in and dial out those things that the industry wants changes on. We could be using that mechanism to try and help answer some of these questions.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, I don't have any more speakers. I will close the public hearing, bring it back to council member discussion and action. Council member Morasco first.
Okay, a couple of quick questions. I think this was answered as you showed us more modern type of apparatus. Initially, it looked like the boxes and everything were so low that they could be vandalized, they could be stolen, ripped off, and so that was a concern. It looks like that's been taken a little bit more into consideration. But the question comes up, so how do we do this when we have multiple carriers? Is it first come, first serve? Like the gentleman from T-Mobile was stating, whoever gets in here first is going to have almost proprietary access to certain areas, which would preclude others from coming in, and that's a big concern and issue.
Bill.
Yeah, and I want to thank both the gentlemen. They were kind enough to come meet with us last week, and that was one of the issues we discussed, and it made a lot of sense to us as well. And so one of the things we could consider, instead of the 300-foot separation between all carriers, we could consider 300 feet on each side of the street, because really when you're talking about a streetscape, you're looking at one side of the street. So if we went to a 300-foot separation on each side of the street, that technically would double and allow
And what's magic about the number 300? I'm just curious.
I think it's just a standard that's been used in San Diego and San Francisco and some other jurisdictions.
Okay, so but we could modify that.
But we could modify that with if the council was interested to 300 per side of the street, which effectively would allow 150 separation.
Okay.
Right. I think also from street lights, their typical separation is 300 feet on one side of the street, but they alternate 150 feet down a street on their spacing.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. And that brings up the next question, which is, why just streetlights?
Well, we're not just restricting it to the streetlights. We'd like the streetlights to be the preferred location. It's the most streamlined. It doesn't have to have sometimes the meter boxes. It has the electrical running to it, and it gets the slimmest design on there. What we've looked at in the ordinance is, as you move down the list, you look at the street light first, and then a replacement street light, and if they're not available to you, then you move to the other utility poles, as referenced here. You could go on the SDG&E pole. You could go on some of these street lights or the traffic signals. We also have traffic signals. Engineering doesn't prefer them for a number of reasons, but it's still on the list of things they can look at to do. We just like to do the street lights as the preferred location.
Okay. As far as the diameter having to be equal to or no greater than the diameter of the pole, that seems like it could be problematic.
We can be flexible on that. As the pole tapers and we get to the design guidelines, the pole is pretty large at the bottom. So you get that canister at the top, and we understand the issue that it'll have to be larger than the top diameter.
But you're saying we can adjust this, but if we approve this ordinance tonight, where does the adjustment come in?
It'd be more in the interpretation with our design guidelines, unless you'd like to allow a larger canister on top.
So one of our options may have to be not to approve this tonight in order to go and fine-tune this and come back with something that's a little bit more palatable for everyone concerned, because otherwise I'm afraid we approve something that has some restrictions in it, and then I don't know what happens at that point. How is that corrected, or how is it facilitated so that these different problems and questions and issues are then addressed?
I think what you're hearing from the industry is that we're this close, and once we get the implementation of the guidelines, we'll be across the finish line. But even looking at this pole on the right side of the picture, like Mr. Paul was suggesting, you can see the base of the pole probably matches the canister, which is much wider than the top of the pole. So that's something that we could interpret as being consistent with what we're proposing.
Can you go back?
The one on the right here, it might match up.
Yeah. Can you go back to the couple photos that you had,
Here?
especially the one, the street sign? No. One more. There you go. So obviously those are larger than what the diameter of the pole is, and yet it seems like that would be a functional option, especially in areas where you don't have streetlights, which is a good portion of the perimeter of our city.
Keep in mind, nothing is banned. It's just the process. So you can do it the way that we're suggesting, the preferred method administratively, or you can do it any other method through a CUP, even if it's wider than the pole.
Which brings up the second to last question, which is the process of the CUP. Could you explain which process you're talking about here?
Well, the conditional use permit process would be those facilities that don't fit within the design guidelines. So let's say the ordinance restricts you to one antenna, and I want to have 4 antennas on there. You can put 4 antennas, but you have to go through the conditional use permit process. Let's say your cabinets are larger than 6 cubic feet. You can exceed 6 cubic feet, you have to go through the CUP process.
Why not an administrative CUP?
That's why I'm wondering whether or not this ordinance is too restrictive now, and we're going to be pushing everything down the road, kicking the can down the road to the CUP process, because you're talking about thousands of poles within our city alone that are going to have to be determined appropriate or not, and that's a lot of CUPs.
Well, we could batch those under one CUP as well. We could batch their sites. If they had 10 sites, we could batch them under a single CUP. So that would be one option. And the reason that we're not looking at an administrative CUP, Mr. Mayor, is because the administrative process would be a director decision. The easy administrative process would be a director decision. If we did an administrative CUP, that also would be the director serving as a zoning administrator. So it would essentially be no difference. And so that's why we felt that the Planning Commission was probably more appropriate in that case.
Yeah.
And then the last question had to do with the legal right-of-way, the public right-of-way, and what can or cannot be precluded. And I think you asked that question to Mike as to whether or not we are in any violation by doing this, or does it become problematic where we could potentially have a lawsuit if this ordinance were to be passed?
I'd be the last one to suggest you can prohibit any lawsuit.
Yeah.
I mean, they'll come. You've seen the arguments from the industry. That's the position they've taken. We've looked at this. I can't guarantee you that you'll not get a lawsuit or even a potential successful lawsuit. But I think what we're trying to do is strike the right balance between what we believe to be within our right as part of our police powers to ensure safety and aesthetic views, and what we're forced to deal with as part of state regulations and federal regulations. So that's as close as I can get to that. And again, I'll again suggest that the hope we could avoid lawsuits by trying to use the implementing guideline process to really answer the smaller type questions that may force a lawsuit at some point.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Gallo.
Well, okay, Jay, you mentioned something about the light poles are generally 300 feet apart, except on East Washington between Harding and Rose. There's like 3 light poles in a half a mile. Okay? That's probably one of the darkest, busiest streets in Escondido. Anyway, that's my pitch for District 1. I think we're going to have to start relaxing some of our design hopes, because the first speaker said something about, cell phones are not a luxury anymore. Cell phones are pretty much, everybody, well, pretty much almost everybody. I'll bet you everybody in this room has one. iPhones are almost not a luxury anymore. And iPads and all the other stuff, all the things that people need service for. And I remember when I was on the Planning Commission and we went through application after application after application for cell towers. And people are complaining, oh, not on my street. Do you want cell phone use? Well, yeah. I said, well, then you have to have that. Okay, you really don't have a choice anymore. You're pretty much going to have to do that. Using light poles, utility poles. This speed limit sign pole, it's not attractive, but it's not going to be downtown. It's going to be somewhere out in the outskirts. So it's green. It blends in with the outside. It is what it is, and this is the world we live in today. And if this is the services that we want, these are things we're going to have to put up with. Mike asked about the planning process. That was one of my questions. I think we're okay with that. And as far as the design of the receivers, don't all the carriers have pretty much the same equipment? I know they operate on different frequencies or whatever, and then it would help out if everybody used the same, but that's not going to happen because everything is proprietary. These guys didn't even shake hands when they passed each other walking to the bike. Okay, so I don't see the big deal with the design thing. I see all these different configurations: square, round, oblong, whatever. But everybody has the same equipment, pretty much. They may operate a little bit differently, but design-wise, they're pretty much all the same. So I don't see where that's a big issue. I think administratively we can handle all this kind of stuff. And the way the electronic world is changing today, man, you buy something today, it's obsolete tomorrow. So anyway, I don't have a problem with any of this stuff. I think it's a good step. I had a note here about the height. I know engineers always freak out when we tried to build something on Valley Parkway, an entrance sign. The engineers got a hold of it and turned it into a construction project. And all we wanted was something welcome to East Valley or whatever, kind of like Hillcrest or Encinitas. No, they turned it into this massive structure. So the arts community freaked out and they said, that's too ugly, we can't do that. So I'm looking at some of these light poles and these extensions on top. Are the engineers okay with this?
So are you?
Wait, Julie's going to answer.
We need. Okay.
Yeah, I think our preference is the street light poles and the mounting on top of the street light poles. We don't have a problem or a concern with. We've been able to look at that structurally, and we're comfortable with that. We have a little concern with the traffic signal poles because we have some traffic signal poles that we've had a long time, and they're loaded in a different way, and that's why we prefer that streetlights be used. We're working with several carriers right now in each of the situations, carriers deploying between 10 and 20 different nodes, and in each case they've been able to find a streetlight that was suitable. So I can see in the future there may be a need for these types of facilities, but at this point in time, we've found that there are plentiful streetlights available, and we've been able to find proper mounting locations for each of the facilities that have come through thus far.
Okay.
So we need
good.
we need to give some direction to staff. So are you okay? Yeah, we still. So are you okay with changing the 300 feet, 200 feet to a 300 feet per street side, and 3 feet to 2 feet? I'm just trying to get a direction to staff. And then change that 2 feet to 3 feet, and then the question I would have is whether it's administrative CUP or regular CUP. The regular CUP is 6 months, $4,500. The administrative CUP is half the price, half the time. So anyway, let's finish the discussion and see. But please try to give us some direction to staff with the council majority here, so we can modify the ordinance. Councilmember Masson next.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is a good start, and I appreciate staff's work efforts in trying to get this cobbled together, because this really, for me, is going to boil down to, we've got industry willing to invest in 5G in our community. They got dollars ready to spend. So the sooner we get this rolled out and ready to implement, the better I think we'll all be. I think flexibility is key. That's what I'm hearing tonight, and that's kind of my mantra. We need to be able to be very flexible about how we proceed forward, because things change quickly, and I hate to be hamstrung and locked into a box. With regard to, I think the point was made about public safety and the amount of people who really just rely on a cell phone only, and that if these hotspots are taken away, that ability for these folks to make an emergency call or whatever, I think that's a serious concern of mine, and I would take that safety issue over an appearance issue any day of the week. Especially with some of these newer technology poles that I've seen with multiple antennas mounted on them. I do have concerns about the CUP process. I know we can batch them, but it takes time, it takes money. There's public hearings involved, and you get NIMBYs involved, and at some point in this process, we ought to be able to handle that at a staff level, and I don't know that we need to go to that CUP level for these smaller facilities. And then I guess the other thing is there's an expression of wanting to move forward quickly because we've got a lot of permits in the pipeline. Can we not approve those without this? Or
we have been.
Okay. So we're moving forward on some projects without having this ordinance in place. Okay, so there's no urgency to approve it.
We need to clean it up.
There's no urgency to prove it tonight is what I'm hearing.
I think what the industry is looking forward to with this is right now, if you wanted to go in a residential neighborhood, any residential neighborhood, it's a conditional use permit. Where this ordinance tonight, it increases the amount of administrative review for most of the residential neighborhoods, except for those on front yards or on non-circulation element streets. So if you're on a collector or a major road or local collector in a residential neighborhood, that's where we'd like you to go, rather than on
Right, but they're going to have to go in the middle of the city. That's just the way these things are going to work, right? We don't have collector roads all over the place, so.
But that's what they're looking for, because then they could batch them administratively rather than doing CUPs for all those. We've been processing the ones in commercial right now under batched plot plans. But the residential, they've been holding off and waiting till this is done, because it allows them to go administratively for 90% of them.
Okay.
Well, and I like that. And, but again, some of the restrictions that I've seen in here, only install on an existing street light or pole. If you're going to add a new pole, whether it's that little green street sign pole, that's a CUP. I just think some of that level might be a little bit overkill. The 300-foot radius, I have a hard time understanding how if we cut that in half to 150, how all the carriers can jump on that and get coverage and compete. I don't know if that's doable or not. I don't understand their world. I like the fact that we want to put the equipment underground. I think that's great that if we can hide that. But, again, I want to make sure we're moving forward and allowing as much flexibility as possible.
What about the 2 feet to 3 feet?
I don't know what that means. I mean, 3 feet or 4 feet. I don't really care if it's on top of a light pole. I don't care if it's a little bit bigger than the pole or smaller than the pole. I mean,
it depends on the route.
I don't want it hanging off with wires and stuff all over. None of us want that. But I think what I was seeing with the newer technology, I saw the one on top. That was probably like a 4-foot thing on top of a street light. But if they need a 4-foot thing, who are we to say it should only be 2? Then what do we need? 4 of those 2 of the 2-footers, or now they have to go on another light? It's not my world. I don't know if it's our world as a city to regulate that kind of box to fit these guys in, but you guys are probably smarter than me. But I just want flexibility. I want everything to move forward. I want to have some control over it, obviously, so we don't have just reckless chaos. But I'm just concerned about how strict this is written as it's written.
You took my talking points away. Thank you. Councilmember Diaz.
Thank you. Is there a problem with co-locating antennas for 2 companies? I've seen that done at the Coastal Commission. We've asked companies to share a utility box so that it's not another box, it's just condensed space, and there hasn't technologically seemed to be an issue with that. So is there a reason we can't have multiple carriers on one pole?
It may be a little more difficult to do that on a street light, probably not as difficult on an SDG&E type pole, but then the SDG&E gets involved, or the city gets involved on structural issues when you start to co-locate on
I'm thinking
them.
about competition, right? If the issue of 300 or 150 feet causes kind of a monopoly in that hotspot area, we don't want to contribute to that. So I don't like the 300-foot thing. I don't understand that if the technology allows the equipment to be near each other and not interfere with each other's company, I don't have a problem with that.
We do allow the co-location, though.
Okay, so allow co-location. I'm not worried about 300 feet. I know there are parts of our city where we have never had the money or the ability to cover the expense of adding light poles. Think Old Escondido. So I'm curious. I know we collect rents from allowing companies to use our utility poles, and our baseball light posts are covered in antennas. I wonder if we don't have a process for saying, okay, well, this neighborhood doesn't even have street lights for you to put your equipment on. Can they buy one? Can they install? Can that be part of a process, or at least an opportunity for them to install infrastructure in an area we're not getting to it? It doesn't seem like a bad way to cost share the expansion of services, and for us, the addition of infrastructure. So you can explore that. I don't know if it fits into the CUP, but it seems like a good place to insert language that, if you want to pay for the pole and the installation of the pole, then maybe we don't charge rent for 10 years or something like that. There's also, for me, a challenge in understanding whether the difference between public right-of-way versus public land. So in a park, for example, it's not really right-of-way, but we've got poles all over the parks with lighting for sports, and we allow antennas on those. Is this conditional use permit process restricted to just rights of way?
This ordinance was just to tackle the right-of-way. We have a larger ordinance that does it on private property, whether it's city property or private property. This was just to address the small cell and that demand that's coming. We don't see a big demand for the new large ones anymore. They're far and few between. Other than upgrades to them, this is what's coming down the line right now.
Okay, so I'm interested in eliminating that 300-foot thing. I would rather have it say something like, limited to 2 per pole, or something that's not burdensome. I never want to look up at a pole and notice it. Like, I don't want to notice the pole when I'm driving around or walking around. So the low profile, obviously as technology is enhanced, everything seems to be getting smaller. So I would never want to look at something on the side of a pole that even gets my attention. And if we do one company or two companies co-located, as long as the same standard is being met of basically low profile and not being noticeable, I don't really care how many companies are on a pole. So it seems like eliminating the 300 and saying easily up to 2 companies on a pole. And if there is no pole that you like or that works for you, if our street lights, our old ones, aren't weighted correctly or installed correctly, if that's what I understood, offer them the chance to replace the pole at their cost. So, because what we're looking for is expanding the web of coverage, not just in Escondido, but nationwide. And if we don't have the infrastructure that allows that, then they certainly should have the ability to help us build the infrastructure. The other thing I wanted to ask about was the electrical use of this equipment. If you install on a light pole and it's tapped into electricity of some sort, is it metered? Are we billing them for what they're using, or are we paying for everything that's on that pole? Per pole. So we've calculated what it costs us to power their equipment on our light pole.
Julia.
We only have a handful of these facilities installed thus far. It's on the order of about 10. In that case, the agreement was drafted almost a decade ago, and so it was a specific rate that was intended to cover those costs. And so moving forward, we'll be looking to ensure that we're doing a market analysis to be sure that what we're charging is similar to what other cities are charging, and that it covers the meter connection, or that potentially a tariff could be developed with SDG&E to pay, and have the utility provider pay directly. So we're going to have to work that out with the agreements with each of the utility companies, the wireless providers.
Like every different type of equipment would have a different energy draw that you probably know what it is. So based on that energy usage of whatever unit they're installing, we should at least be cost neutral on that. And so the reason I ask is because we spent some money recently replacing light bulbs and old street lights so that we could save money on electricity. So I would hate to then, jack up our electrical costs because we didn't calculate what these antennas, as much as we want them or need them, what they cost. And so I don't want to leave that unanswered. I would like us to factor that into the CUP somehow, or at least any cost.
Julie, is the electricity bill a significant issue?
I would say the cost per month added would not, for electricity usage of these facilities, wouldn't likely be significant. The vast majority of the streetlights that we have in the city are not metered. We pay basically a monthly rate to SDG&E, and so that's the tariff that I was speaking about. That streetlight poles that have these types of facilities on them could pay a little bit more to SDG&E, and we would cover those costs in the lease agreement that we have with the wireless providers.
Right. There is a way SDG&E funds a center, an institute. It's somewhere off of the 163, where they actually know what every different type of light bulb and every different type of gadget consumes, or the energy draw of each thing. They can calculate it. So to pay a flat rate seems like an odd way to compensate SDG. We should pay for what we're using and not any more than that. Separate issue. So I of all the things I just talked about, the last thing that I would be concerned with here is the part about the conditional use permit, or this process that does require extra review if it's going to be in somebody's front yard. I really like that. I think that's important and smart, that we give individual residents an opportunity to at least know. I don't know if we can notice. Is that what we do? Put up a public notice that somebody wants to put a cell phone thing in your neighborhood?
Jurisdictions have done this differently. They don't. Some of them don't do CUPs, but they have a public notification process where they send out a public notification and they put where the facility is going to be. They either put a mock-up or they'll put a sign on there. And if they don't get any opposition during the review period, then the project's approved through through an administrative process. For instance, San Francisco. It doesn't necessarily go to conditional use permit, but there's a definite notification process to do some of these things, and some of the other cities do that also.
What is our process?
Right now, if you did a conditional use permit, you would have to notify within the 500-foot radius, and you'd have to post the site and post in the newspaper.
And that's what we're proposing to keep.
To keep.
On non-collector streets, you would still have to go to that process?
Correct.
Well, that's what we do now, though. So we're not changing that. That's what we currently do?
In residential zones.
Could we, I don't want to hold up approving this because I think it's mostly okay, but maybe we can double back and refine that part of it in the future. I like the idea that, if I walked out my front door and suddenly there's stuff on a pole and nobody told me, I would be upset.
The notification requirements is for both the regular CUP and administrative
If you
CUP.
did administrative CUP, the notification is the same.
It's still the same, okay. All right, you're done, Councilmember Diaz?
I think I am.
Okay.
So that residential part of it stays as it's always been. We're not changing it.
That's what he said.
Yes and no. Only we're keeping the CUP for those non-circulation element streets and in somebody's front yard. What we're taking it out of is the larger streets. So, for instance, you have Cichicado Parkway, where homes back up to that, and you've got a noise wall. Perfect place to have it in a residential neighborhood, or along a side street. But you're going up, a standard residential neighborhood, and would they be appropriate? In some locations, they probably would. Some they may not.
Why the noise is a factor?
Pardon me?
Why the noise you mentioned? You mentioned the noise?
Oh, no, we don't see a noise issue. I was saying it may be appropriate in some locations and may not. That's why the expanded review.
Okay, let's go. Yeah, we're going to go to you, Councilman Rusk. Go ahead.
Well, in regards to that particular object, that particular concern, okay, I'm thinking about in front of our house, the street lights, everything that's out there. What if I just decide, I don't ever want to see anything on top of that street light? That's one neighbor that can make a stink to stop it, which doesn't make sense because, in all honesty, who looks at the top of their street lights every day as they're driving by or in the evening when the lights are on? You don't. It's above the street light. And I find that to be very problematic, and it's going to wind up being problematic in a lot of different areas where people are going to want this technology, and there are going to be other people who said, I don't care if we ever have that technology.
Let's not stop it. It's just have an opportunity to know it's coming. That's why you still go through the permit process, and eventually it comes to us.
But they don't own the streetlights.
But that's what we do now. We give them the opportunity to say something.
I understand that.
Okay, Councilman Rusk, go ahead.
And then the last thing is, the old adage, you don't know what you don't know. I admit, I don't know enough about this to say whether or not this is too restrictive and limiting. And because of my ignorance, it appears to be too restrictive and limiting for us to approve this and then go back and say, and then we're going to go back and fix it later on. We have to pass it so we can read it and find out what's in it. That's just not my cup of tea. I would prefer that we delay this and go back and try to fine tune it a little bit more. I don't know how much time that takes. I know you guys put a lot of work into this, and I really appreciate that. But unfortunately, from my perspective, we have some problematic issues, and we're going to sit here tonight, and we're going to come up with 10 different options about can we eliminate 300 feet? Can we eliminate the 2-foot antennas? And we're going to keep going back and forth until we possibly all agree on it or come close to it, and I just don't see that happening.
Right. Well, I think the general direction from the City Council is we need more flexibility on locations, but we need to keep the restriction on aesthetic. Bottom line is, you know what? You restricted on a 300 feet radial. It's not good. I agree with the 300 feet, linear feet. We need to have more flexibility on the location. I'd rather see 2 on a commercial street rather than seeing 1 on commercial street and 1 in residential area. I believe the aesthetic of this issue is extremely important. We cannot go and see the pictures that we have seen here. I believe on the long run, the technology will take care of that. Everybody, those old big boxes, They're not going to be efficient. They're going to be replaced with the smaller and more aesthetically. I am very concerned about the appearance of the city, and you don't want to see those boxes everywhere. But I'd rather be more flexible. I think the city council is okay with changing the 300 feet to a linear street, 300 street feet approach. I would like. That's why we created the administrative CUP. If the administrative CUP, it's going to take 6 months and a lot of money. I mean, you need, by the time we are approving it, the technology will change. So maybe the applicant is going to change again, apply again for another one. This is a technology-driven things. I attended a T-Mobile grand opening of a store at the Westfield, and I talked to a lot of merchants that they represent merchant and a lot of people attending that store from the urban core of the city. And I talked about how can you survive without having internet access and computer access. They said because of the cell phones. The cell phones is the answer right now, as indicated by one of the speakers. We need to make sure we don't really have an ugly site. If council members, 3, 4, 4, or 5 council members talk to Bill in the same day, that means we have a problem. I'd rather see this going back. I would support administrative CUP. That's exactly why we created this faster process. I am okay with cutting down the feet. I am flexible with the locations, but I am really, we should keep a oversight over the aesthetic of the city. That's for sure. It is a necessity. I think we have to make sure everyone in Escondido have access to internet and have good coverage. We have it mostly in the entire city, but where I live near the mall, we have a dead spot. Here at City Hall, we do have a dead spot, in my office, but I think we need to make sure we have to balance that versus the approach. Okay, so I believe, yes.
Well, our recommendation would be then that you just keep your public hearing open.
Right.
And continue it to June 14th.
Okay.
Staff's been taking notes, and we'll review the tape and bring back a modified ordinance that addresses your concern.
Excellent. And do we need to vote on that?
You don't. You just need to vote on a continuance of the
Okay. So I need is your motion to continue? Please don't make the motion before we are ready to do it, because your motion is to approve the ordinance, I believe. So is your ordinance now? I need a motion to continue the public hearing to June 14th. Is that your motion? How did you know? You made the motion about 10 minutes ago. So we haven't even discussed that. But anyway, I'm glad you are accepting this motion. Councilmember Diaz, are you okay?
Yes, I am.
Okay, the motion is to postpone the hearing till June 14th. Please vote.
I knew all you guys were going to.
5 yes votes.
Okay, thank you. Future agenda items? Any items, Council? No. We move on to City Manager's weekly activity report. It is attached and it is also online. Oral communications, I don't have any request. Do we have any council members' subcommittee reports? Okay, Council Member Morasco. Go ahead.
Okay, we had our Center for the Arts subcommittee meeting today. We discussed a couple of different items. One was possible land lease in Kit Carson Park in a small parcel that's somewhat landlocked and limited, would not come into play or interfere with our future plans of expansion at the park, something that they'll eventually come to the council, Grape Day Park. And it would be for a step beyond to build a small administrative office over there near the facilities that they currently are leasing. But this would be something that would be brought to the council for further discussion. We also spoke in regards to current plans, Center for the Arts, as far as and city's staff, where's Jay at? Reparations, different things that are in dire need of repair currently and items that will need to be addressed down the road. Some of the items have actually already been addressed. Mr. Gallo, the historian that he is, was probably able to tell us exactly about the carpet and everything else that was put in there and the longevity of it and the needs. But anyway, it was a good meeting, productive meeting, a few other items that I'll post in regards to what was discussed. Mr. Gallo, anything else that you think was pertinent that we need to? That's it?
Okay,
thanks.
Councilmember Gallo.
Okay, just a little report on North County Transit. We had our board meeting last week. One of the things we approved was, safety has always been top concern for the district. So we're adding 19 people on board the Sprinter line. We're also working with Escondido Police Department and Oceanside Police Department to patrol the Escondido Transit Center and Oceanside Transit Center. The sheriff will take care of Vista and San Marcos. That's their law enforcement in those two cities. I don't know why this was a big deal, but apparently it was. We have one route, 389, that goes to Pala Casino up I-15, so we cut that out. And now we have the 388 bus, which is going to be coming from Valley Center to be at the Escondido Transit Center before 8 o'clock in the morning. Apparently there's a lot of people who go to the casinos in Valley Center and they have to get to work, so they have to catch the bus by 8 o'clock. That's the only way I can figure it out anyway. Just to give you an idea on the cost, Matt Tucker asked me to tell people about these costs because we're looking for money to do these things. The replacement of a locomotive, $49 million. Delmar Bluff stabilization, which is pretty important. I mean, the whole California coast is unstable. I don't know why everybody's surprised when the damn thing collapses. $83 million. Bridge replacements. Here's a total of 27, 28, $38 million. Sprinter vehicles, $266 million. Buses, 85 buses have reached the end of the useful life. Current estimate for CNG buses, $29 million.
And the ridership is down.
And we complain when we have a $2 fare. I mean, everybody here, everybody watching,
Great.
anybody who pays taxes.
Great. I think the what did you call it? The bluff stabilization things. It's a cover up for a tunnel that they want to do for the coastal line, and I think this is misleading. Good luck. We need to do the 78 before we start looking at these expenses. You have to look at the Sandag action plan. Also look at the lockbox project, like the 78 is one of them, before we start adding new project, because we're not going to have the same amount of money as before. I have a quick report on LAFCO. We have hired a consultant, Peckman and McKinney, and we ended up with Clay Phillips handling that. So he's going to hire. We have the application will start coming in, I think, till the end of June. So the first week of July, we will hire a new executive director for LAFCO. Yes, so we're good to go. Okay, that's all what we have. Our next meeting is June 7th. With that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Mike.